Dori, friends. First of all, the title. I would like to add a word to it. I would like to add the word global indifference. Because without it, all the other threats would not succeed. But when we have a global indifference, when the whole world is indifferent to our problems, to our experiences, to our hopes, to our joy occasionally, then we are in trouble, because then the world would be perverted. Second, whenever we discuss anything that touches the Jewish people and Jewish history, we must always approach it from almost from the historiosophical viewpoint. It's always a door, a philosophical door to our destiny. Now, I almost became part of Durban I. Kofi Annan was Secretary General, and he created a group called, believe it or not, a group of the eminent persons, and that group was supposed to give its moral auspices to Durban I. Kofi Annan called me and I said, of course, how can I say no? And then I got the program. I think even Anne sent it to me. When I read the program, I called up Kofi and I said, Kofi, I'm terribly sorry, I must resign. Because he had already announced the composition of the group. My name was on it. He said, why? I said, I have to see you. I came to see him, and I said, look, I cannot, because I realize now, from the program, that Durban I, which is supposed to be a convention or a conference against anti-Semitism, is becoming a conference of anti-Semitism. Oh no, he said, you come and speak. I said, I am not going. And I resigned in protest from my membership. And I told Kofi, I said, we were very friends, very good friends when he was Secretary General. I said, I'm sure that it will be a blemish on the UN and an embarrassment to you as his Secretary General. I must tell you that he is an honest man, because he went to Durban and he sent me a message. He said, Elie, you were right. Now, what do we do? If 9/11 would not have happened, that day and that week would have carried Durban on its front pages, because the scandal was so atrocious. To have a Durban which is simply destined and directed and inspired by hatred toward the Jewish state and the Jewish people, it surely would have been the subject discussed in every home, every meeting of all good people. But because of 9/11, of course, that became the front page. Now, one thing is clear. What is clear to me anyway, that anti-Semitism is still a subject that we must deal with. And to me, it's a source of astonishment. I was convinced that at least one success can be attributed to the tragedy of our people. That after Auschwitz, there would be no anti-Semitism anywhere. And I would say, from the viewpoint of logic, if Auschwitz didn't cure the world of anti-Semitism, what could and what will? After all, Auschwitz could happen not because anti-Semitism was its only motive, but without it, it wouldn't have happened. There were other elements, no doubt, political and economical and racial, but surely without anti-Semitism there would have been no Auschwitz. And yet, immediately it's there. I thought it would take maybe 10 generations to come back. But then anti-Semitism actually never disappeared. When you are a student of history, or the history of literature, you are shocked to discover, even among the greatest writers, both in France and in Russia, is Dostoevsky or Marat, the greatest writers, you find anti-Semitism in them. In the 30s, my God, in the 30s, anti-Semitism. And some of them are great. So how could you combine greatness and hatred? Well, we are an exception. We have always been. And of course, anti-Semites denounced our feeling of superiority. But then I learned, at least in my lifetime, never to allow the enemy to define my Jewishness. I am defined as a Jew because we are all children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and students of Rabbi Akiva and students of the great Baal Shem Tov. That defines me, not the enemy. The enemy may do whatever he wants, whatever they want. I will not allow them to touch the substance, the core of my identity, my inner identity, which is simply I am a son of the Jewish people. Why then do they go on? Because they are convinced that if they were to go on and on and on, somehow it will not only change the world, it will change us in our own eyes. That really, are they that stupid to think that because of what they say, I will change? The stupidity. But then anti-Semitism is stupid. To say, what do they say? That we control the whole world. As you say in Yiddish, Halevai. I wish it were true. When they do that, I say, then give us the world for 1 century. I promise you that when we'll give it back, it won't be worse. But they believe it. They believe that we control Wall Street naturally. We control all the theaters, we control the literature, we control everybody. Now mind you, there was a time in one land at last and at least, the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic really had everything controlled by Jews. Who was the director of the best theater? A Jew. Who was in the bank? Naturally a Jew. Who controlled the most important newspapers? Jews. So for a few years, somehow, they did what they thought they were doing. And that, of course, ended right away. For 12 years, they were right. And then came Hitler. How is one to explain the eternity of anti-Semitism? A religious Jew would say, Misinai, it comes from the hatred of the Jew, comes literally from Sinai, which means the moment God gave the law to the Jewish people at Sinai, together with the law came the hatred of those who were receiving the law. So old, because it's true. Anti-Semitism became universal, which means they accused us of being too rich or too poor, too universalist or too nationalist, too intelligent or too stupid, too learned or too ignorant. It's always too much. Somehow we live at the stage of excess. Whatever we are excessively what we are. Whatever we do it excessively in order to be perfect. So, what then can we do to stop anti-Semitism? We tried by assimilation. We tried, it didn't work. We remained a people, rich with its heritage. We tried everything, but it didn't work. Its identity, but identity was in crisis. The identity was the object. We always did the right thing. We defined ourselves from within. Now, On the other hand, you may ask, how come that anti-Semitism was so universal? Stalin and Hitler had nothing in common, except both of them hated Jews. Why? I don't know. Anti-Semitism is as much a mystery as our very existence. Then we go further. Zionism. Herzl was naive. He was convinced that the Jewish state would end anti-Semitism, because he became a Zionist only thanks to the Dreyfus trial, which he covered as a journalist. And when he saw and heard the crowds in Paris shouting death to the Jews, he said, "But I'm a Jew. They want my death? What have I done?" Literally, that's how he thought. He writes about it in the Judenstadt. That's how he came. They hate us because we have no state. So let's have a state. I said he was naive, because it's not true. We have a state, but now the state is being hated. So what did he achieve? And there we say, no matter what, the price is worthy. It's a good price, a high price, but nevertheless, here we are. Now we can come furthermore. And we can say what's happening today. What's happening today is a disgrace. What you heard from Ambassador Bolton is so correct. The United Nations was a great ideal, after all, to bring together representatives from the entire world. Only